I was not head boy. No, I was the opposite. I mean, I'm sure we're rolling, but I once pushed a kid down a flight of stairs because he was taking the mick out of my stammer. I've got a stammer. I've had a stammer since I was a kid. He happened to take the mick out of it at the top of a flight of stairs. One of the prefects took me aside and said, "Look, I would take you to the teachers over this, but because your older brother used to serve me weed, I'm going to let you off." So I got away with it for being very much not the head boy. You can put any of that out. I'm here today in the Curzon Soho with Danny Boyle. How are you, mate?
Very good, you?
Yes, I'm good. Are you familiar with this place? Have you spent some time here?
I have spent quite a bit of time here, yes,
Yeah.
over the years. God, it was coming here, I was trying to think, when was the first time I came here? But I can't remember. I mean, I've been here frequently.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, it was the only place for anything not mainstream, anything
Yes,
more
that's
unusual, anything European, Asian cinema, all sorts.
Yeah, and you could always check, there'd always be something odd on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I had a cinema, where I come from in Manchester, there was a cinema, it's gone now, called the Avon, which had 4 different cinemas in it,
Yeah.
which was unusual at the time for being dedicated to European films,
Yeah.
as they were called then.
Yeah.
And so I used to spend a lot of time there. Apparently, I was told, and it must have been at exactly the same time because I'm exactly the same age as him,
Yeah.
Morrissey was in there as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, doing the same thing, watching,
That's
kind of
wild,
escaping the world and watching these weird European films, which we sort of understood but didn't understand really. But I would go more like, I go to Curzon in Aldgate East, because that's quite close as well.
Yeah. Have you got a specific cinematic experience that comes to mind of your own, of being in a cinema, even if it's as a youngster? Because you said like Henry V is edited into this, and things like, are there any films that come to mind of being a real formative thing for you, of being in that big screen and going, I want to do that?
I want to do that is a weird one.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't come from being in a cinema or watching a TV or anything like that. It comes from seeing a poster.
Right.
And I remember I'd just moved to London and there was this poster and it was across it was a massive, I mean, it probably wasn't compared to what we do nowadays, but it felt like a massive billboard and it was completely black and there was just white writing on it and it was the title only and it was Apocalypse Now.
Wow.
And I remember seeing that thinking, I want to be a film director. Seriously, honestly. And I was like, and I hadn't seen the film. I really wanted to see the film, and I did see the film, and it's become an absolute pivotal film for me. But it was a poster, weirdly.
Have you got a specific place that you like to sit in the cinema? Where's your spot?
I do. Because I saw that was one of your questions.
Yeah.
And I do, and I didn't know whether to admit to it or not. I always try and book an aisle seat on the right.
Right.
Because I have a meniscus tear injury in my right knee. So I always kind of want to kind of like...
You want to have that freedom there.
I want to have that freedom there. But I like sitting, and I was thinking, because of your question, I was thinking, why is that apart from the old meniscus tear? And I think it's that I like being in the cinema, I love being in the cinema, and whether they're empty or full, weirdly. So it's not just the communal thing, it's also the spatial thing. But it's also, I think, sitting on the side, because you're a filmmaker, you're always keeping an eye on the audience. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You're watching the screen, but you
want to see how people are reacting.
Yeah, it's just like, I think I do that. I am interested in seeing what they respond to. I like that. I respect that.
One of my most annoying thing in horror specifically is when people laugh when you know really they've just been scared, and it's a laugh to kind of cover it up. Like, there's none of that with a good crowd who just embrace it.
Yeah. They're not being too clever.
You mentioned the spatial feel of a cinema, and you've nailed what I think is amazing about cinema, because I think you can get big TVs these days at home, they're great, and you can get surround sound, but it's that loud sound, like sound is the key thing for cinemas for me, or the difference from home and cinemas. Loud sound in that space, I just think can't be replicated. And for things like horrors, sound is key, right?
Yeah, I mean, for horror, it's absolutely fundamental. And you know it's coming because you can hear the sound drop out.
Yeah.
You think, oh, fuck, when's it coming?
Yeah.
And then it comes, you know, and that's part of the ride that you buy into, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it's also, sound is, it's very difficult to explain to people. There is such celebrity around picture. Directors, cinematographers, the visuals, the reference points. It's very difficult to talk about sound with it. You know, people say, yes, I wanted to make it look like a Damien Hirst moment, or it was meant to look like a Caravaggio, and there's all these reference points, but sound.
Johnny Byrne and Brendan Feeney and that, who worked on the sound on this, worked on a film called Waves, which is one of my favourite cinematic experiences because of the sound. The sound in that genuinely had me, this sounds stupid, I put my hand on my heart to make sure I was okay at one point, because it's like, I feel my heartbeat is going too much. And they did Zone of Interest and Poor Things and things like that, which sound is absolutely key. So I guess how important is that collaboration to you in film?
So when we got started making films, I always remember thinking, why is it that even a bad American film has more impact than a good British one? Because it did in the cinema back then. And we sort of uncovered the reason, which is that the money gets spent by the cinematographer and by the visuals, and there's no money left for post-production sound. And we all know that sound are treated as the poor partners on the film anyway. They're always last to be consulted, etc., etc. And that, you just thought, that's what the Americans do. They ring-fence money for sound, and we started doing that. You keep a block of, because the impact your film's going to make, that disproportionately will be impacted by whether that pot is full or empty. You know, the impact that the film will make. And Johnny Byrne is a genius at it. And it's been amazing working with him. He works in a different way. I normally work with a guy called Grant Fremantle, also brilliant at sound. But Johnny works in a much more accumulative way. It's a long process over time, and it's kind of like he builds it up slowly, and the work reflects that. The layers that and different people hear different people hear different things at different times, rather than it being channeled in one effect. I mean, he does the channeling moments that you want, the big hits and stuff like that, but it's a layering thing, a layering texture.
Absolutely, it's weird. I was talking to his team about a project I've got in pre-production while they were working on 28 years later, and one of the things they said, when you're filming, just get me as much as you can, because of those layers. It's like, as much as we can of just sound of that area, of that vibe of anywhere, just get me as much as you can. Don't get what you think I need, get as much of everything, and you never know. So that speaks to the way he works in layers in that way,
and
right?
There are no barriers with sound, because it's invisible, and because you don't think you're hearing it, you sort of just accept it. You think you're seeing the visuals. What you're hearing, a lot of the time, is actually sound is making you feel like what you feel about those visuals. The most obvious way is music, but also the sound design.
Is it your second time working with young fathers on this, who again are just absolute icons in my opinion?
But they came along because we were filming in Scotland, and they came along and had a look at the set and stuff like that, which is quite nice for them, I think. I don't think they've been on, although they make they do the videos, obviously. I don't think they've been on a full film set, and that was really nice. And so when we did this, I thought, I want a real change from the first film. The first film has very iconic sound, and I thought, well, we can either just repeat that, which will be slightly disappointing ultimately, or we can take a risk and really change the landscape. And I thought about that. I don't know why they popped into my head. It's an instinct thing partly. And so I got in touch with them. I'd stayed in touch with Alloy, and I said, do you want to do a film? And they said, well, okay, yeah, let's have a look. And then we sent them the script. Scripts are great, but you never know what people read in a script. When they read a script, everybody has different reactions. You can't see.
Particularly if you're not used to reading scripts as well. They're so in your mind. So
what they think it is, I don't know. So then we just started swapping music. I'd send them stuff that we were using as temp, some ideas, and then they'd send some stuff back and say, try this, and so we kept swapping stuff like that, and then they wrote this piece, and anybody who knows their music is going to recognise most of it, because it's kind of as a flavour of them, as you want it to do. But then they wrote this other piece called Remember, which is this 5-minute, towards the end of the film, very moving. And it's as good as anything from anyone. All the classical score composers, everything. It's as good as that. And they made it in a shed. I mean, they don't even work in a garage. A garage is
too fancy.
Too fancy to describe where they work. They work in a shed. And if you get invited, take a coat, because there's not much by the way of heating.
Another thing I want to talk to you about, so with this cinema, I tend to get there early because I want to watch all the trailers. Now, I don't watch trailers at home and in general, I'm not a fan of trailers because I feel it's a bit of a lost art. But I think you guys smashed it with your trailer for 28 years later, because I think the problem with trailers is they've become to, here's the big thing, here's the biggest thing. I always look back to the third Nolan Batman film, which again I thought all his films were amazing, but the trailer had the big scene in the baseball stadium, in the American football stadium, and you got to see it and you went, oh my god, this looks amazing. And then I went to see the film, I was like, oh yeah, here's that scene from the trailer.
Here's that scene again.
So it would have been the most amazing thing, but because of the way you use the boots, the Kipling poem, it felt like it was its own little movie rather than just a collection of clips from the film. So how important is that process to you in the making of trailers, in the art of that?
You're kind of in the hands of the studio, really, because by the time trailers have to be made, you're involved in the making of the film, and I find it very difficult, even though I work with an editor who can make great trailers. When you're actually making the film, you shouldn't, this is what we feel, we shouldn't make the trailer because the two become confused, and it is a different art form. And this guy, Dave, from Sony in America, sent this trailer. We were we were a bit more than halfway through the editing process. He sent this trailer and we watched it. I remember Alex and I watched it, and it was just like, oh my God, that's great. We didn't, it's not giving away the whole film. It's kind of its own thing, and it had this identity because of this track, Boots. Now, at the same time, in the editing, we had this sequence, an archive sequence, that we were looking for a tune for a song, for a poem, for a hymn. We were looking for something from the past to put on it. And suddenly there's this, and we said, what is that? And neither Alex and I knew it. And they said it's a Rudyard Kipling poem. And it's recorded in 1918 or 1916 or something. And it had the power it had. And it's one of those things, and this happens and it just fitted. I mean, you manipulate it a bit later, but it just fitted. And it's just like, it's not even a decision you're sort of involved in, it sort of makes its own way into the film.
There's a beautiful magic there, isn't there? That you can put it down as luck, but it's like, it lands and... How do you find this period of time in between you've made it, you know what you've made? Because you said in the cinema, you sit on the end and you want to look at the audience reaction.
Oh, I see.
You can't look at the audience reaction yet. You're waiting to look at the audience reaction.
Yes, you are.
In a matter of days, you'll be able to see the audience reaction. But how do you find this period of kind of that anticipation is building in kind of a horror way? It's that anticipation is building and building.
I know it is nerve-wracking. You're kind of saturated with the film experience yourself because you've seen it so many times. You're desperate for an audience to get a hold of it. You're desperately nervous about that.
But to let you know. To let you know what it is, because it's so hard when you're so deep in it.
It's also, they're the final part of it, is how an audience place it, how they experience it, and then how they place it. And that's all to come. You kind of learn that later. And it's surprising sometimes. Sometimes nobody comes, and then there's a great expression, if the people don't want to come, nothing will stop them. And it's like, it's your only consolation when you have an absolute flop, where people just don't turn up. But later, they then decide they like the film. That happens, weirdly. Then there's other films which are hugely popular at the time and have no afterlife, despite that. So you cannot predict at any stage quite what its journey post your involvement is going to be. It has its own, it's grows up. It's weird. And it's kind of, and you have to learn a humility about the process, because all filming is about everybody thinks they know what they're doing.
Yeah, of course.
Just bollocks.
Yeah.
You do, on one level, technically, things like that. But otherwise, every film would be a huge, endlessly ascending trajectory.
Yeah.
You know, and you can get all the best people in the world, and they can't even take off, and it just stays down here.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that this storytelling is one of the mysteries, and you know, we should be able to predict what people want to watch and what they don't want to watch and how they're going to experience it, and you think you're working in order to influence that, but you have to be humble at one point and go, here we go.
What's your view on the British kind of film industry at the moment? Because again, I find it interesting in the timing thing, because when 28 Days Later came out, like horror wasn't the genre that it is now. It wasn't the genre that gets people in cinemas, that has this excitement around it. But it still feels to me in the UK there's not a great amount of support for British horrors. I mean, it's just hard to get films made. What's your kind of thoughts or experience on the film industry at the moment?
So horror is what, it's interesting. Like when we made the first film, 28 Days Later, I remember clearly they said, no girl is going to go and see this film. Women won't go and see this film. And that was like, they were absolutely adamant. Because I was trying to get Naomi Harris on the poster.
Yeah.
They had Killian on the poster on his own, and I was trying to get Naomi on the Harris. She said, and they're just like, no women are going to go and see this film. What are you worried about? It's like, stop worrying about that. No women are going to go and see it. That has changed. Now women make up a significant proportion. And one of the reasons that horror has maintained its presence in cinema, it's one of the few dependables as a way of getting people into the cinema. It doesn't provoke a choice of, oh, I'd prefer to watch it at home. People generally like to watch horror in the cinema as a kind of, you know, in the way that you watch a big movie in the cinema.
Yeah, everyone react together.
Yeah, because you get that reaction together. And I think, especially in the current circumstances, that's really important. I'm very lucky that I can raise money. Although it's tough, it depends on your subject matter, but this one, we didn't have a huge problem raising money, certainly for the first two, because it's a part of a three trilogy, if you like, and we haven't raised the money for the third yet, but we've raised the money for the two. So it's hard for me to comment on what it's like for a younger filmmaker trying to get into the business in Britain and the support structures there. I don't really know enough about it, what it's like for them. You know, other avenues, when I was doing it, there was Channel 4, which was hugely supportive. I was very, very lucky. And once you go down that avenue, then you're not really in part of the BFI or that kind of channel, which is fine, that should be for other people as then. But I got a lot of support from Channel 4,
I love that. And again, it's hilarious looking back at the change of even view from the first one, because now I think there's a lot of women who will want to go and see Jodie Comer. There's even more who want to go and see Aaron Taylor-Johnson, quite frankly. So again, the fact that they were like, we can't put a woman on the thing because women aren't going to want to go and see it. It's like, there's a lot of reasons to go and see these films.
It's also the general taking down of barriers of what's supposed to be a woman's concerns and what's not is a good thing. And horror, they are interested in. And let's be honest, they know far more about horror than we'll ever do. 100%. Way more. Just within their DNA is this process that we can only just watch if we're fortunate enough to do that, and they have access to. And they always used to say that, they said that about Alien, didn't they? Have you heard that about Alien? Alien is really frightens men, because unless you know, generally speaking, men are frightened of penetration, and certainly of anything growing inside them. Tends to invoke fear, whereas women, it's part of their...
It's not that big a deal.
It's not that big a deal. They always used to say that. That was one of the reasons that Alien was such a huge hit.
I love it. How do you know when it is the right time to come back with a film like this? Because I think you nailed it with the Trainspotting sequel as well, because both Trainspotting and 28 Days Later have had time to become these beautiful cult classics, and now there's that demand to add to them and extend them, and particularly in 28 Years Later and the following films from Near DaCosta is doing the
second
next
one,
one, and more. There's so much world building that can be done. I was saying to the guys earlier, I'm not the biggest fan, and they might have to cut this out, I'm not the biggest fan of the monarchy. What would the monarchy be doing in that world? There's things like that. There's things like that you're like, how would this affect different areas of society?
And you have to. I think people like watching these kind of films partly for that reason. I think people like to see the world building. Okay, if it was suddenly Crown Zero, what would people rebuild? How would they go to as their survival mode? And you have to ask all those questions. What would have happened to the monarchy? You would imagine that they would imagine, the survivors, that the leaders had been rushed to safety. Because you saw the way that Bush was rushed to safety on 9/11 and things like that. So you just go, you imagine that kind of thing would have happened. But the time thing is, I don't even think we realised it when we set it up. The 28 years later becomes everything. Because for some people, the culture has stopped, absolutely stopped dead. There's no new culture other than the culture they're going to create on their island, because communication has gone everywhere. And then brilliantly, Alex writes this character who's able to come into the world and show you that the rest of the world has continued.
That's kind of the beautiful thing to have this,
And is it worth anything, the culture that they've been building, or is it kind of like not that attractive? But that's all carried on. Meanwhile, they're in status. They are literally in status. And so what they've done is they've looked back in time. They can't look forward. They've nothing to look forward to. They can't go on holiday or start thinking about a new car or any of those kind of things that people think, oh, I'll aim towards I'd like to move to a bigger house or things like that. There's none of that available to anybody. So what they do is they look back to a glorious past, which is a danger and is currently part of the world's, there's an epidemic of it in the world, of people glorifying the past and the nationalism and the feeling of, we were great and we can be great again. And this lot look back to Henry V and Agincourt, because the bows and arrows that they are using, that's a glorious kind of cultural story, myth that exists about the English bowmen beating the French at Agincourt against the odds, and so they put themselves in that lineage.
It's one of the beautiful things as well, because it's not just looking back to 2002, it's looking back to what people in 2002 were looking back to, if you know what I mean. So it goes even further, it becomes this further removed thing. You mentioned Alex there. How easy was it to convince Alex to continue this? Because when you made the first one, Alex Garland was, this great writer, like up and coming lad. Now he's this amazing director in his own right. As, you're both now icons for your work as directors. So how was that returning to that collaboration, I guess?
No, it was good. It was good. I think he wanted a break from directing.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, he wanted a break from it, and because he's originally a screenwriter and a novelist before that, I think he quite liked the idea of having the freedom to write, especially on an ambitious project.
Not have to pull it off.
And not after. You could write stuff and say, well, see how you pull that off. There you go. Good luck with that. It's like. But it's also because the idea was to write 3 films, was to write these 3, and there'd be an epic sense of it. Although it starts with a very small family on this small island in this small community, it's got an epic reach about it eventually. So the span of it would be something that he could really enjoy writing, which I think he has done. He's written 2 of the scripts so far, and the second one has been filmed by Near DaCosta, and the writing is exceptional. I mean, he's a very, very good screenwriter.
How did you find handing over the reins?
Tough.
Because Near's amazing. Like that Candyman reboot was fantastic.
Yes, it was.
And obviously the Marvels, all sorts of stuff. But how was that? Because it's yours and Alex's baby, and now, there's a new parent.
It was a good thing, because we realised it was a bit of a boys' club.
Right. Yeah.
When we appointed her, we realised we'd broken up something that we needed to break up, which is very much a boys' club. Yeah. So she's came in and she said, I'm not going to make a copy of your film,
Yeah.
And you went, oh, okay. I didn't ask you to, but maybe I would have done if you hadn't already said I'm not going to. And then and it was great actually, because when you take on these deals, making a back-to-back film, you also, it's not just the logistics of actually directing the thing. I've got to concentrate on editing the first one to get it ready for release now, while she shoots the second one and she's editing now, getting the film ready for its January release. So you're on a timetable that you have no choice about, really.
Yeah.
But it was funny handing it over to her. I was like, it was fine, and then I went up to see them after they'd been filming a couple of weeks. Went up to see them, and the actors were so enthusiastic about her. I was a bit pissed off. I thought, they're sort of like they've changed their loyalty, have they?
Yeah.
They said they really like me, and now it's like we really like Nia.
Yeah. Like you want to hear it's going well, but not too well.
Not too well.
I want you to be having a nice time, but come on.
Yeah, no, they did. They really responded to her, and I remember seeing her work. Always her work is brilliantly acted.
Yeah.
Actors do respond to her. She's one of those directors like that who has a real affinity with them. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Right, okay, we're done.
Time's up, apparently. I'm going to go and chat with Nia.
Yeah, of course you are. Well, good luck with that. She'll get an hour, yeah? Well, I get half an hour, she'll get an hour, yeah, no.
I appreciate you taking the time, and I love the film. I'm so excited for all that's ahead.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Good.